Hello, and on behalf of VMUG, I'd like to welcome you to today's webcast, Preventing Data Loss and Downtime with VMware powered by DRaaS, presented by AJ Kuftik, Principal Technologist for Expedient, and Anand Iyer, Product Marketing for VMware. Thank you for participating in today's webcast and for your continued support in the Global VMUG program. Before we begin, I have 3 quick housekeeping items to go over. First, today's webcast will be recorded and available for you on demand. You will receive a follow-up email with the on-demand link from today's webcast, so keep an eye out for that. Second, a Q&A session will follow today's presentation. All questions will need to be entered in the question window near the bottom of your GoToWebinar screen. And third, there will be a short online evaluation that pops up as you exit the webcast. Please make sure to take a moment and let us know what you thought of today's session and what you might like to see going forward. Attendees from today's webcast will be entered into a drawing to win a $100 Amazon gift card. A representative from VMware will email the winner directly following the webcast today. So good luck. All right, let's get started. Anand, I'll turn things over to you now.
Thank you, Julie. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Preventing Data Loss and Downtime with VMware-powered DRaaS. My name is Anand Iyer. I lead product marketing for availability solutions in the Cloud Provider Software Business Unit at VMware. As you all know, this is a joint presentation between Expedient and VMware. And Expedient is one of VMware's marquee cloud provider partners. And my co-presenter today is AJ from Expedient. Again, the goal of today's webinar is to showcase how you can prevent downtime and data loss in a simple, cost-effective, and secure way using DRaaS from Expedient, and that is powered by VMware vCloud Availability. So if you are currently unprotected or looking for a simple solution to expand your current protection for your VMware environments, this webinar is perfect for you. We have a lot to cover today, including a demo that AJ is going to show us. So without further ado, let us get started. So let's start by looking at some numbers from a recent report. So these are really hard truths from about data loss and downtime. And according to one report from Forbes published in 2018, downtime for an organization could be very expensive, and the average cost of downtime per hour could be a staggering $100,000. And as you can see here, data loss is also very common for organizations. And according to a CSO online report published in 2018, 70% of businesses reported data loss. This could be due to accidental deletion of records, files. It could be because of viruses, fire or other disasters. And as you can see, the average cost of lost or stolen record with personal or confidential information is around $150. These are really, some staggering numbers. So, what if, the question now is, what is causing the downtime or data loss? What are some of the, top reasons for downtime and data loss? So, and according to this report, the top 3 reasons for downtime and are power outage, network failures, and also IT and software errors. I would like to show a real-life example of a disaster due to a hardware failure. Queen's University in Ontario, Canada, suffered a total data center takedown when a faulty air conditioning unit sprayed oil and the fire suppression system just shut the entire site down for nearly 20 hours. And this happened shortly before student registration. And as a consequence to this, all information systems, including email, financial systems, human resources systems, were not able to operate during this downtime. Just unimaginable, right? And the fast fact here is that, when it comes to small businesses, according to this report that was published recently, 60% of small businesses that lose data close their shops within 6 months of disaster. And again, the top 3 causes of data loss are hardware and software failure, human errors, and viruses and malware. I'd like to show you another quick example here of a data loss due to human error. I'm sure all of you read about this incident at Pixar. So when someone at Pixar accidentally ran the rm delete command on the workstation that stored Toy Story 2, I'm sorry, year of work was already erased. And to add fuel to the fire, the backup system also failed and the film was completely gone. So with downtime and data loss being both common and expensive, many organizations, such as yourself, are looking to their cloud providers for answers. And the top 2 managed services sought by customers from their cloud providers are backup and recovery, and also DR as a service. So the question now is, what's needed to protect you from downtime and data loss? So how about if you get enterprise grade disaster recovery from a cloud provider with zero capital investment from your side, right? And it will certainly be icing on the cake if the solution is simple to implement, the solution is cost effective, and it's very secure, right? And how about a 5-minute recovery point objective? So what's the solution now? I mean, what if you could get all this? And what's the solution? The answer is DR as a service powered by VMware vCloud Availability. VMware vCloud Availability is one powerful unified solution used by VMware cloud providers such as Expedient to offer simple, secure, and cost-effective onboarding, migration, and disaster recovery services to or between multi-tenant VMware-based clouds. Again, it is one powerful unified solution for 3 important or 3 critical use cases or services. The first use case is, as you can see here, on-premise to cloud disaster recovery. This is based on the familiar VMware platform that you all know. And if you're a VMware environment, I'm sure you are, it becomes easy for you to get familiar with the platform. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, learning new tools and new technologies. And the second use case is onboarding and migration. And as organizations, as enterprise customers or mid-sized companies or SMBs, you can efficiently move workloads from your on-premise environments to the cloud, or even between clouds if you're already running workloads in a cloud. And the third use case is cloud-to-cloud DR, cloud-to-cloud disaster recovery. And this offers protection to your workloads that are already running in the cloud. So how easy it is for you to get a simple, cost-effective, and secure DR from a VMware cloud provider, right? I mean, that is the ultimate question here. So for that, I'm going to let AJ take over from here. AJ is going to walk us through the VMware-powered DRaaS that is being offered by Expedient. AJ, over to you.
Thanks, Anand. Waiting for you to pass that over to me. There we go. So hi everyone, my name is AJ Kuftik. I'm principal technologist for Expedient, and I'm going to go through the Expedient Enterprise Cloud and how we're using vCloud Availability to deliver what Anand was just kind of talking about with disaster recovery as a service. But first, what I want to get into is the concept of disaster recovery, right? what are disasters? What could go wrong? And Anand mentioned a couple. There were things like human error. Everybody always thinks about natural disasters, right? They think about hurricanes or earthquakes or snowstorms, but the problem is that even when they're prevalent, like if you live on the East Coast, hurricanes are a thing, they're not terribly common, right? They're still very rare. Things that are far more capable of happening are things like power outages, right? We lose power to a building, but there are ways around that. You can have generators, you can have battery backup. But human errors are the ones that really come into play. Things like the Toy Story 2 story, for lack of a better term, where you have somebody doing something wrong and deleting data. But I think everybody has a story about something like this, where a man with a backhoe has ruined your day. And these are the sorts of things that you can't really plan for in terms of, okay, well, how do we prevent that? Well, maybe we put the cable overhead so that somebody with a backhoe can't do that. My personal backhoe story involves a dump truck with the bed too high. So there is no safe place for cables. But in these sorts of instances, these are all things that can kind of sort of be prevented. But the one that's starting to grow now are malware attacks. And I want to kind of point out 3 examples here because I think this is really important to kind of understand that this is a far more likely case of when you're going to go to your disaster recovery procedures, but aren't necessarily deemed to be something that you think about during disaster planning. So City of Atlanta got hit with a cyber attack, ransomware, where they were asked to pay $51,000 in ransom. The city did not want to pay $51,000 in ransom and ended up paying $17 million to clean up and resolve their issues. They were down for a week. So a week of downtime plus $17 million doesn't exactly sound terribly fun, right? City of Baltimore, similar software, similar issue. They were asked to pay $80,000 in ransom. They also did not want to pay the $80,000 in ransom, and it cost them $18 million. And some of their systems were down for multiple months. Their water billing system was down for at least 2 months. So those 2 pieces are the costs of not wanting to pay the ransom. Lake City, Florida paid $460,000 in ransom to just recover from their cyber attack because, as the mayor stated, it was the cheapest alternative for the city. So these are not hard outages. These are not physical disruptions to your service. This is software disruption to your service based on a malware attack. This is something that's going to happen. So one of the things that you could do with that is you could go to your disaster recovery plan. You have one of those, right? How hard could that be? How hard could DR be? Well, it's not easy, right? Where do you go? Or what's the cost of your downtime? Right? How much does that cost? Is a week of downtime something your business can afford? I'm going to guess the answer is no. We've spent a lot of time with our customers going through what these sorts of things are and why this is important. A lot of times people will not invest as much into their DR plan because they deem it as more of an insurance policy, when really the cost of your downtime and the cost of performance is a real concern. So then the question is, let's say you decide to go build a DR strategy. Where do you go? Do you own a second data center? Do you own a second site? Do you want to pay to build out all of your second site? That can be hard. I've worked in previous companies where we didn't have a real second site, and we were going to do DR with a trailer. There's services like that out there. So you have to decide where you want to go. Now you need to determine what resources you need. What hardware do you need? Are you going to go buy all of that? This is one of the easy places for a business to not so much cut a corner, but try to be a little bit more financially responsible, or at least they believe they're being financially responsible, and reusing existing gear. Let's say their current production gear is about 3 years in. They replace that hardware with new hardware and then reuse the 3-year-old production hardware as disaster recovery. That's fine, it'll work, but the business is going to start to expect that their applications will perform as they did before in the event of a disaster. And everybody says, well, it's disaster recovery, it's not going to perform that way. you're likely not going to go back to your old way. You're not going to go back to production, or you're going to fail back and it's going to take a long time to get there. So the business either A, has to be okay with you having limited performance during that time, or has to spend money to actually go buy the proper hardware. How much time can you actually allocate to doing this? I want to thank everybody who's on this webinar for taking the time to sit and go through this with us. But a lot of us are slammed. A lot of us have a lot of projects going on, a lot of planned work, hardware replacements, patching, all of the things that IT operations brings to the table, that going and building an entire DR strategy, a second site, and all these other things, it takes a lot of time to do that. And that takes away time from working on the projects that the business wants to take on to try and improve their efficiency and try to improve their operations. So that is another piece of this. And included in that time is who's going to build this and who's going to support it. This is a DR site. In the best case scenario, you're never going to use it. I want everybody to think about that for a little bit. This is something you're building to hopefully never use. So in this sort of case, you still have to patch this thing. You still have to maintain it. You still have to deal with it. You still have to pay for power and space and all these other pieces. How do you get away from something like that? How does the networking work? Can we bring our networks over? What does our public IP space look like that we can take on to fail over in the event of a disaster on our primary site? How does that all look? Who's going to test this? Who's going to click the button to actually go kick off the test? A lot of people have DR plans. Not a ton of them test that. And it's fun that even when you do test it, each year things can change, new applications come on board, those sorts of things, that every year disaster recovery testing is even a challenge. And then who's going to validate that it worked, right? Who's going to go do all of the testing that you need to do in order to make sure that those applications came up? I can say that I'm recovering 50 VMs, and if all I'm doing is turning them on, that's not necessarily a recovered test, right? You need to make sure that your applications are up, that your services are up as they should be. So these are the sorts of questions, and these are just the first 9 I came up with. There's plenty of other questions around disaster recovery, insurance, and those sorts of things. How do you want to handle your disaster recovery? So what are our options? Let's look at our options. Well, the first one is your DIY option, right? That's a pickup truck with an interior door to a house as a tailgate. That is pretty much the analogy for building it with maybe your existing hardware and reusing it, or we're going to kind of fudge this, or we're going to maybe buy some used equipment. You're trying to put something together so that it's there, and you hope you never have to rely on it to hold things in. And that can be a problem because the business expects it to just work, right? They expect that when we recover from a disaster, that it works the same as it did before. And in most cases, when you build it like that, it won't. Your second option is a hyperscaler, AWS, Azure, GCP, where it's a bit like a flying car. Sure, it still drives on the road, but you're going to have to learn how to fly it from time to time. And there are a lot of other pieces to a hyperscale platform that come into play, things like data egress charges and the architecture that's on the bottom. It's not necessarily VMware. There are VMware options in the hyperscale clouds, but these are the sorts of things where it's not as straightforward, it's not as one-to-one as what you're currently running on-prem. And finally, you have DR as a service, where you get to, it's like leasing a very expensive vehicle. Everything's built, everything's correct, it is a brand new vehicle, but you're not paying for the full price of the vehicle. You're paying for a limited amount of mileage, you're paying for a limited amount of use on that vehicle. So that's what DR as a service is, right? And you get all the features, you get all the whiz-bang features to it without having to pay for the entire platform. So let's talk about Expedient. We were founded in 2001. We are a cloud, colocation, and managed services provider. We're recognized by Gartner for disaster recovery as a service and hybrid cloud. This is not our first rodeo. It's not our fourth either. We're VMware Cloud Provider of the Year for the Americas for 2019. We're nationally recognized, industry recognized for what we do with disaster recovery as a service and with the VMware Cloud Provider program. We're very happy for these awards, and this is you know, kind of an acknowledgement that we do what we do and we do it well. So when I talk about all those questions, where do you go? Who's going to build it? Who's going to support it? We've solved that problem, right? We have 12 data centers. We have 24/7 support for your disaster recovery platform. We have hundreds of customers and thousands of VMs running on our systems being protected by our DR as a service products. We know what you're going through. We have many, many customers who are doing the exact same thing that you're looking to do. So all of this proven success can be brought forward to you, so you don't have to think about building your second site. Where are you going to put it? How are you going to run power? How are you going to pay for all this gear? We can bring those solutions to you. So how do we get started? It's pretty simple, right? You download the vCloud Availability OVF. It is a single VM. It's about 350 megs. And if you've deployed any sort of VM OVF file to your environment, it's the same thing. Deploy the VM, put an IP address on it. The actual setup process is pretty simple. You point it at your vCenter. You point it at Expedient Enterprise Cloud or any other VMware cloud provider, and you can start replicating. For us, our replication network can be a private circuit direct to you, or you can go over the public internet. My on-premises data center in this instance will be going over the public internet, but there's no real difference in there. So let's talk about migrations and protection. So vCloud Availability is actually really neat in that it's not just a DR as a service product, it's also a migration tool. So if you decide, hey, this DR as a service platform is pretty great, we want to use it for our production too, you can use it to migrate your VMs into our Expedient Enterprise Cloud. There are some networking considerations to be made. So you need to have your internal networks for where your VMs live, 10.1. whatever, those sorts of IP ranges and networks built in our platform, and also your external networks and how you want to handle those. And that's something we can go through as part of the process and as part of the onboarding. So from the vCloud Director portal or from vCenter, you can actually look at it from either way. You can set up migrations and protections, and you go in, you choose your VMs, and you hit go. So let's jump into a demo here real quick. And let's see if I get this right. And I do. So this is my on-premises data center. It is on my premises. And I have two hosts running a bunch of random VMs here. This is the vCloud Availability VM. It is 4 CPUs, 4 gigs of RAM, and 10 gigs of storage. It is a super tiny little VM that is doing nothing but sending your data from point A to point B. So once it's deployed, you can go into the vCloud Availability menu, and you can see the topology. So this is my on-premises environment. This is the Expedient environment that we have here in Pittsburgh. I can see all of my outgoing replications. You also have the ability to replicate back. So if you do need to fail back, so if you use us for DR as a service and you need to fail back to your production data center, you can, and this is the way to bring it back. From the Expedient side, so this is the view from the actual cloud side. So I can see my replications from on-prem. The one piece that I find interesting is that my outgoing list in my on-premises data center and my incoming from the Expedient Enterprise Cloud side, they look exactly the same. So from the cloud side, I'm just going to do this from the cloud side because it's a little bit easier for me. So I click New Protection. I see my existing site that I've already set up. I have all of my VMs. So if you're already replicating, it gives you a little bubble that says this VM's already replicated, which is nice. So you can't goof and double replicate a VM. So I'm going to pick Ubuntu 4 here, and we're going to click Next. And I'm given the choice of 2 virtual data centers that I have access to. So ACM, this is our location in Pittsburgh, and 701 is in Indianapolis. So I'm going to pick the Pittsburgh one because it's very close to my house. And you have an option here to seed your VM. So if you already have a VM that's living inside of Expedient Enterprise Cloud or any other VMware cloud provider, you can link this VM to the VM that's in the cloud and it'll say, okay, I know that all of that data is already there, and I'm only going to replicate changes. So let's say you did a backup to our cloud, or copied it back up to the cloud and restored it because it was a 2 terabyte or like a really big storage-wise VM. You could then use that as the seed and then point this to basically replicate any changes. In this case, I don't have any of those, so we're just going to go ahead and move forward. You have the option of all the way down to 5-minute RPO, as Anand said earlier. We also have the ability to go every 5 minutes up to an hour, I believe. And then after that, hour 15, hour 30. I'm just going to leave this at, I'm actually going to drop this down to 1 hour. But you have the ability to go all the way down to 5-minute RPO. There's also this retention policy. So in all of those ransomware things, this is one of the tricky parts of replication is if something like ransomware hits, that data would all be replicated. The encrypted data would be replicated. This gives you the ability to roll back to a previous point in time. So if you have something like this, you can set a number of instances spread evenly over a number of days. So if you do 4 instances over 4 days, you get 1 per day. You can ramp that all the way down, all the way up to 24 instances spread evenly over 1 day. So you can have 24 points in time over the last 24-hour period, or 1 per hour. So there's a way for you to kind of balance this out. So maybe my production database servers, I want this to be on that, but maybe my application servers, I'm fine with 4, 1 every 6 hours, because I don't have a ton of data change on my application servers, or at least I hope I don't. You can also do application level consistency with quiescing. Certain things don't really like that, but domain controllers in particular, but these are the sorts of, these are the sorts of things that are available, these settings that are available. So next, I'm gonna start it immediately and I'm gonna click finish. All in all, these VMs are very small, so I'll just freely admit that this is going to go pretty quickly. But what's happening here is I've set this up. This is going to reach into that vCloud Availability VM on-prem. It is going to tell vCenter to start replicating that data through the Availability VM up to the Expedient Enterprise Cloud to our side. It actually doesn't take terribly long. What it's doing is it's building the VM and creating the vDisk on the bottom, and then it's going to replicate all of that data in. At which point, it honestly doesn't take a ton of time. Right now, that VM, is that VM powered on? Yeah, the VM's powered off because I have to turn it on in order for it to replicate. There it goes. So once it's actually powered on, that state will change in the availability. So I can see that I'm synchronizing now and I see it on both sides. So that's all it took. And the actual start to finish time for me to even get my very first VM, which was this one, replicated, was about 45 minutes of deploying the VM, getting it configured, and then getting my first replication going. So very straightforward. There's not a ton left to do here other than being able to click this and telling it to fail over. So that's getting it all set up. I'm going to jump back into my presentation now. So with the Expedient Enterprise Cloud, we have 12 data centers, as I mentioned earlier, but those 12 data centers are starting to spread out. So previously we were very much in the sort of Ohio Valley region, but now that we've branched out into Baltimore, Memphis, Phoenix, and Boston, we're starting to gain more of a coast-to-coast data center coverage. This allows you to build a distributed edge cloud strategy. So what that means is, let's say you have a national footprint. You could put servers in our Phoenix data center. You could put servers in our Boston data center and serve your remote offices in a more local fashion than if we were just in Indianapolis and Pittsburgh. This also allows you to have very low latency, high speed connectivity to the hyperscalers. So all of those black marks on the map are our connections to the hyperscales. So AWS, Azure, and GCP. We have 100 gig low latency connectivity to those providers. So if you bring your VMs onto Expedient Enterprise Cloud and you want to start using an AWS service or an Azure service, you have the capability and the connectivity to those without having to go run native circuits to your data center or VPN tunnels. So it's a very easy way to on-ramp into public cloud while still maintaining the knowledge set that you currently have. So as Anand mentioned earlier, this is a more cost-effective method, right? You don't have to go make the big capital expenditure and buy 10 hosts or 15 hosts or however big your environment would need to be to support your disaster recovery needs. Because one of the problems with a CapEx purchase is you have to buy the whole host, right? You have to buy, 512 gigs of RAM in this host when you really only need 300 of them. So that causes you to overbuy because you have to buy all the resources. And when you buy all that hardware, got to have that licensing. You have to have operating system licensing. You have to make sure you have all that storage, all of your switching, and that can get very expensive very quickly, which is why a lot of companies will just say, well, let's reuse the production stuff for DR and we'll bring in new production gear. What we do is we charge per gig of RAM and per gig of storage on a term-based pricing. So what that allows you to do is say, hey, I don't need to recover to 10 hosts. I need to recover my 200 VMs. And my 200 VMs have this much RAM and this much storage. And it allows you to grow granularly so that when you add the 201st VM, you just pay for that additional VM. And so that allows you to just pay for what you're using, and you don't have to buy the whole host. You don't have to buy the farm. You're only buying the cow. It's the same hardware resiliency that you're used to. It's still vSphere HA. It's still vSphere DRaaS. It's all VMware's technology. We're not doing anything terribly special that is a different architecture, something you have to relearn. It's the same thing you already know. We have robust built-in security. We have data rest encryption in flight. We have data rest encryption and data encryption in flight. So when you're actually doing the replication, that's all encrypted. When it lands on our platform, it is vSAN and it's all encrypted at its base. We have a 100% SLA. It's up, period. That's our SLA. There is no 5 nines. There's no nines. It's ones and zeros. We have diverse location options, as I mentioned earlier. We cover the entire US. We have a number of capabilities to deliver it as well to where you need it to be, if you would like. We support microservices, so with the container extension to vCloud Director and Rancher as a service, we're bringing microservices capabilities online so that your developers can do their containers. They can also do API-based provisioning to vCloud Director. So your developers can start to do the things that they want to do with the infrastructure that maybe you weren't entirely prepared to take on yet. So let's help you get there. This is part of that path from on-premises to the cloud. So today we have our existing VMware hypervisor, we have our existing applications, our existing skill set, and a very fixed capacity. You own the number of hosts that you own. If you want more, you have to go buy more hosts. You can't spin up to hit a higher need and then spin it back down and only pay for what you use there. That's not how an on-premises data center works. In the near term, you slide over to Expedient Enterprise Cloud and you take on vCloud Director, which then says, okay, Expedient, you got the hypervisor, you got the hardware. We're not going to worry about that. I'm going to worry about my VMs and my applications on top. This allows you to leverage your existing skills without completely relearning everything. I know I've said that a number of times, but I kind of want to make sure that I'm hitting home on that because this is one of the key challenges of hyperscale clouds. It is a completely new model. It is a completely new thing. And so you've spent the last 10 years building up these skills with VMware. Let's keep using them for a little bit to help you bridge that gap to where the business wants to go and where you want to go as well. We're API driven and we have the elastic capacity that you're looking for. You want to be able to only pay for what you're using, and we can help with that. And then as we move long term, you start to get into containers and functions as a service that your developers want to use to move away from servers and away from all the patching of operating systems to more function driven. That's going to take time. So I just want to make sure that we're all clear on that this isn't just a magical thing that's going to happen. You deploy Kubernetes and ta-da, it's cloud native. These are things that take time. It takes time for the developers to move over there, but you start to bridge that gap. We also are working on multi-cloud integration so that when you want to go take on hyperscalers, it's all integrated together and it's all capable of being used as one cohesive unit. And this is part of that unified management and integrated security. I mentioned earlier the VMware Platform. So we're still vCenter and vSphere on the bottom. We're still ESXi. That hypervisor architecture does not change. We're vSAN. We're using vSAN for storage. It is all flash vSAN. We have new hardware coming in all the time to make it go faster and make it bigger. So we are capable of hitting what you're looking for and bringing on your resources. vCloud availability is what we're using for data protection. We can bring your VMs over using vCloud availability. We have uptime and optimizing of performance with vRealize operations and log insight. So we have the capability to get those performance data, to get your performance data to you so you can trend out your things, so you can see whether or not you're using your VMs properly. NSXV for secure networks and load balancing, and then vCloud Director providing a multi-tenancy interface on the top. This is the whole portfolio. So I'm just telling you this one little bit, the Expedient Enterprise Cloud and our vCloud availability thing. This is the entire thing. So we can do all of the security services that you're looking for, a lot of cloud storage things that you're looking for as well. So we can take on a lot of this infrastructure things so you can get a lot of that off of your mind and you can start to focus on the things that the business is asking you to do. One of my things that I like to kind of consider is on the far right is co-location services. So let's say you've got that old mainframe, AIX, HPUX. You can bring those physical assets into our colo, deploy it next to Expedient Enterprise Cloud, and have that as your VM platform. And those two things can coexist together. So you don't have to get rid of your legacy. You don't have to have it, locked in a closet somewhere. Mainframes are very large and they like to breathe. But if you have this gear that is just still very critical to your business, you can bring that in, put it next to our cloud, and then get the connectivity to the hyperscalers and have your entire IT spectrum covered through one platform. So to recap, DR as a service from Expedient, we're solving those problems. We support those disaster recovery solutions for your business so you don't have to. You don't have to go think about where you're going to build it or who's going to build it and support it. vCloud availability is a simple and cost-effective and secure way to deliver that disaster recovery for your business. And the Expedient Enterprise Cloud can be the start of that cloud journey. So I just wanted to cover that through. But I'm going to turn it back to Anand and we can get into questions. Thanks.
Thanks, AJ. Could you please share the screen with me?
I'm glad your name starts with an A. You were right at the top.
All right. Thanks, AJ, for that wonderful presentation and showcasing Expedient's disaster recovery as a service powered by VMware's vCloud availability. Just to re-emphasize and just to recap, getting DRaaS from your VMware Cloud Provider Partner, such as Expedient, is very simple, it's cost-effective, and it's very secure. You'll be able to set up and validate enterprise-grade DR within minutes, as AJ just showed us in his presentation. It's not going to take you days to have this set up. And most importantly, you'll be using familiar VMware technologies and tools that you're already aware of. And by getting DRaaS from a cloud provider such as Expedient, you can save on CapEx investment and move to an OpEx model. And you don't have to worry about managing infrastructures and can easily accommodate growth with the flexibility that the cloud gives you. And above all, the solution is very secure, end-to-end, from your on-premise to the cloud, and giving you that robust security and peace of mind. And it's time for Q&A, so please ask your questions now.
Okay, this is Julie. There are some questions in the queue already. I'll start reading them for you. First, it says, question for Expedient. What portion of your customers are selecting vCloud availability? What size are these customers? Are they SMB, mid-market, enterprise?
I muted myself when I shouldn't have. So our customers are looking into vCloud availability. We've in the latest 3.5 release has actually given a number of features that we need to get into our platform. Our customers that are using our disaster recovery as a service have been using other technologies to bring in, but we have SMB, medium, and enterprise all doing disaster recovery as a service with us.
Okay, let's see, the next question. We have only a handful of physical servers. Our backup software can back up our physical servers into VMs. Can we use that to sync our physical servers to your DR environment, or do you have a method to do that for physical servers?
Anand, do you want to look at that from a vCloud availability standpoint?
I need to get back to you. That is a very good question. I don't have an answer for that. But usually, vCloud availability is better optimized for, virtual environments. So I need to get back to you. Julie, is it possible for you to jot down who that, from where that question came from so that I can get back to them?
Yes, you'll get a list of all the questions and who asked them after the webcast.
Okay.
So the next question is a two-part question. How does the licensing work, and does it also work with Nutanix with Acropolis?
So in this case, I'll answer the second question first. It can work with Nutanix, but not with the Acropolis hypervisor, because this connects to vCenter to do that, to know where the VMs are and what VMs to back up, and it uses vSphere replication to do that. So it would not work with Nutanix with Acropolis, just because that's not how the vCloud availability platform works. Anand, I'll let you ask the question on licensing, because I know that we have our own charge that we have for our VMs. So
yeah, so basically the licensing that we offer, it is for cloud provider partners, and I'm not sure where that question is coming from, because if it is coming from an enterprise customer or an end customer, then I think Expedient is better suited to answer that question. But we have our own licensing models for cloud providers.
yeah, and then in that case, it's part of the cost of running the VM. So we have the per gig of RAM charge is used to determine. It has all of the things in it. It has the host licensing, has the host itself, the actual hardware, vCloud availability, vCloud Director. All of the licensing is included in that. So whatever what our cost of the VM to you that we would charge you includes that license. So there's not a separate line item for it.
Yeah, just to clear that, in fact, from a VMware perspective, we target cloud provider partners. We have about 4,100 partners worldwide, and we have a licensing scheme that is targeted to cloud providers. So if the question is coming from an enterprise end customer, then it is better for a cloud provider to answer that question. So, okay.
Okay, the next question, how many VMs will a single vCloud availability appliance handle?
Anand, did we lose you?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I think based on the latest round of testing that we have done, it could be anywhere from 750 to 1,000. But I'll get back to you on that once we have the final test concluded. Yeah.
Do you have data centers in Canada?
No. but that doesn't preclude us from looking into that. We do have customers that have done things internationally. So we do have private nodes that we've put in various places. So it is not out of the realm of possibility, but we do not have a open data center in Canada. No.
Okay. The 24-hourly point in time is a snapshot that points to the original data set, 2 TB in your example. If it was hit by a ransomware, it is no longer usable. How would your snapshots recover the data?
So you would be going back to a previous point in time prior to the ransomware hitting. So the concern there, I believe, would be around data loss. Those are the sorts of scenarios where you kind of have to balance. Do you want to be back online, or do you want to take a potential small loss in data? It's not a fun scenario to be in, certainly, but you would just go back to that point in time. The encrypted bits would not be part of that data. Those would be dropped. So.
Are there also synchronous data replication possibilities, or is 5 minutes the smallest async RPO?
Yes, from
right
a
now,
vCloud availability perspective, yeah, it's up to 5-minute RPO.
Okay, we have 2 people that want to know the typical price per gigabyte.
That would be more of a sales question. Those things can be negotiated. I don't have a price list in front of me. So we can get in contact with Expedient Sales, and we can go through, Expedient Sales can be in touch, and we can go through what that might end up being for you.
Okay. Can a VMware 6.5 host without vCloud or NSX still use this service?
So the answer is we need to have a vCloud director for vCloud availability to work. And it can work irrespective of whether you use NSX or not. But we need to have vSphere and vCloud availability. That is a requirement.
Okay. Someone wants to know, can you tell us which high visible brands or companies are using this service?
Could you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
Okay, which high visible brands or companies are using this service?
So from a VMware perspective, as I mentioned, we have about 4,100 cloud provider partners, and I would say that about 60%, 60 cloud providers worldwide at this point in time are offering DR as a service based on the cloud availability. And I don't have a figure on the number of end customers that they are targeting, but from a cloud provider perspective that are using vCloud availability, it's between 60 and 70, if I'm not mistaken, from the last quarter number.
We have a number of large companies, a lot of highly visible. We have a number of highly visible brands using us. We have a number of case studies on our website, expedient.com, where you can go read about companies using us for disaster recovery as a service. There is one of the more interesting ones was an insurance company in Florida is using us as a secondary site for them, so that they can have they could actually fail over pre-natural disaster. So I know I said those were rare, but they happen, and they failed over their entire site before the hurricane even made landfall, and so they did not sustain any sort of outage as part of that. So that's one of our case studies that you can go take a look at on our website.
Okay, how are you helping with external network requirements, dedicated and whitelisted IP addresses?
So that comes back to how we want to handle how you, the customer, how you, the customer, want to handle your external IP space. So we use Juniper VRSX firewalls to provide that external connectivity. It is part of a failover system that we can help you put together. It is not, it would be part of the onboarding process as to how that would look. Some customers don't want to do a full failover. They want to do more of a manual failover, and that's fine. But it is up to you as a customer and what we are capable of delivering as part of that.
Are the subnets in the failover data center the same as the production data center when you fail over, or do the virtual machines have to be re-IP'd on failover?
So that is part of that is part of the onboarding process. We want to make sure that you don't have to re-IP because that's a big pain. So that would be part of the build process, is to know what networks you need to have available when they land. So your internal subnets would be available there. But that's part of us working with you on the routing and how that all makes its way to the internet and those sorts of those networking questions that are honestly fairly unique each time. It's how customers want to do it. How did they set up their networking? Those sorts of things. So it's more of a unique thing. So from a blanket statement, yes, we can make sure that those IP addresses are available, but it's more of a question of how it was set up on the production side in the first place.
Okay. For any business still running applications that need Server 03, is Server 03 supported in replication?
So Anand, this is where you can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but this replicates the VM. It doesn't care about the operating system at all, right? As long as Server 03 is supported, it'll do it.
Right.
And I think
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So it goes, vCloud availability is capable of doing replication all the way back to vSphere 6.0, I believe. And I think 5.5 update 3, correct?
That is correct, yeah.
So if Server 03 is supported on those hypervisors, it can do it. You should get off of Server 2003. That's just me doing a little public service announcement for moving off of out of support operating systems.
Does the source VM have to be powered on to be protected by vCAV?
I believe it has to be powered on in order for the replication to kick off. Because once it's powered off, then there's no need to replicate because there's no data changing. Anand, correct me if I'm wrong on that one.
That is correct. Yeah, that is correct.
Can you limit bandwidth used by vCAV?
Right now, we have mechanisms to basically monitor bandwidth consumption, but stay tuned for the future release where we can certainly do bandwidth throttling. But at this point in time, we have the visibility. We give customers and cloud providers the visibility to view bandwidth consumption. And basically, you can make changes based on that. So.
Okay. Are there VM size limits for this service, such as amount of RAM or number of virtual CPUs? For example, can I replicate a VM with 16 vCPU and 256 gigabytes of RAM allocated at the source?
I need to get back to you on that.
Okay. How is this compared to Zerto?
In terms of what? In terms of price or in terms of?
Here is, what are the differences in using this solution versus using Zerto with a cloud provider as a target?
Maybe AJ can answer that.
So we're also a Zerto partner. One of the key differences is Zerto does admittedly have a shorter RPO, so they can go sub 5 minutes. It is one of that's their big piece. That's why it's called Zerto. That's the big one that jump out to a lot of customers, is they can go sub 5 minutes. In terms of it. Yes.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
It is one of the driving forces. One of the things that we're starting to see with customers is, hey, I don't need zero RTO, or I don't need a small, I don't need a small recovery point. I need to be able to, I can deal with my recovery point being more than 5 minutes or more than 10 minutes. So this is where they're starting to look at maybe tiering some of their things. Their mission critical stuff goes on to sub 5 minute RPO because they don't want to lose any data. And then above that, then they say, okay, this is where the majority of my things will go. So we're starting to see customers asking about tiering of their disaster recovery as a service pieces.
And just to add to that, VMware's vCloud availability is purpose-built for VMware environments. As I pointed out in the presentation, it is very simple because you don't have to reinvent the wheel learning new technologies. And with vCloud Director, you get self-service capabilities that is unmatched with other competitors. And also, based on our own research, internal research, and having talked to cloud providers worldwide, I can say that from a cost perspective, we are very, very competitively priced against Zerto. So, yeah, I mean, from a product standpoint, yeah, vCloud availability is purpose-built for VMware environments, and also from a cost perspective, we are very, very, very competitive.
Okay, we have several physical Oracle servers. How could those be handled?
So that's where we kind of have to have a bigger discussion around disaster recovery as a service outside of even the scope of vCloud availability. I'm sorry, Anand. But when we start talking about physical servers, we have to start looking into what hardware needs to be on the other side. Can we replicate into a VM? Can we do, this is where other technologies would potentially need to come into play. vCloud availability is a VMware Platform product. So when we start talking about the overall disaster recovery planning, that is one of the benefits of using a company like Expedient. This is our wheelhouse. So we can help with additional pieces to that puzzle that may be outside of the scope of just your virtual platform. But that's a deeper discussion on how you would want to do that. Would you build additional? This is where you potentially do have to go acquire some hardware for a second site, but instead of having to do it for everything, you only do it for the several physical Oracle servers that you have, especially given Oracle's licensing requirements and those sorts of things.
Okay, and then for the people, there are several people asking about pricing. Do you want to just give them like a contact information or point them in the direction of where to go?
Yeah, let me. I want to make sure that we get, if we want to get into pricing and those sorts of things, that's a discussion we need to have. I see there's a couple of Expedient people on the webinar here today, so I do appreciate them. If you go to our website, top right corner is a Let's Talk link, expedient.com, and go to there, click on Let's Talk, and we can fill out a form and ask about pricing for DR as a service, and we can get back in touch with you and kind of go through, really what you're looking to do and the sort of things that you need to have, because everybody's slightly different, right? Everybody has, several physical Oracle servers, or maybe they have, here's our big virtual environment, here's our VDI platform. So trying to figure out what it all is and trying to build the best solution for you.
Okay, great. Well, that was perfect timing because that's about all the questions I saw in there, and we're about out of time. So I just want to say thank you to our speakers for taking the time to speak to us today. And to remind the audience that VMware will contact our raffle winner directly after this webcast. Also, all attendees will receive a follow-up email with the on-demand link from today's webcast. To find out more about the VMUG webcast program, visit vmug.com and check out the education page. And please make sure to complete the short online evaluation that will pop up as you exit the webcast and let us know how today's session went. From all of us here at VMUG, thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.